All right, so in this video, we're gonna take a look at blocking in an attack animation inside of Blender. And the way we're gonna do this is a little bit different than most of my other tutorial videos. So if you've seen a lot of my tutorial videos, like the Spider-Man animation walkthrough, the Hulk animation walkthrough, and then just videos like breaking down my workflow, the typical workflow that I use for creating body mechanics types of animation is to use a layered approach, and oftentimes I'll throw in just a basic cube, a basic piece of geometry to first figure out the timing and the spacing of the animation. But this video is a little bit different. This video is actually using a pose-to-pose straight ahead approach. So this is a workflow I use sometimes. It kind of depends on the animation, but this will give you a good sense of how to approach an animation with a different workflow. So all of my videos have been that layered approach. This is something a little bit different. Now it isn't the straight like pose-to-pose approach you might be used to. So oftentimes if you're animating pose-to-pose, you'll start by just figuring out the main key poses of the entire animation. So oftentimes you only need 5 or 6 poses in there to describe the entire animation. Whereas the approach I use in this video is to go straight ahead. So I'm still working on building the poses out first for the character, but I'm working straight ahead. So I'm starting at the beginning of the animation and just going through toward the end of the animation. So it allows me to mix a little bit more of pose to pose and just also figuring out the timing really early by using this kind of straight ahead approach. So one thing that I wanted to note before we actually jump into the video is that this was recorded on a little bit lower audio quality. I was actually just recording it on my headset. So the audio quality is a little bit less than it normally is, but hopefully you'll still be able to watch along just fine. So with that, let's just go ahead and jump into the tutorial.
All right, so I'm gonna go through blocking this really simple attack animation that I shot reference for. Kind of show you the process of breaking down your animation, making sure you're adding in the correct breakdowns to get the motion that you want, as well as adding in those holds that are really key to solidifying the movement. So I'm just going to start here. So I have, I shot side view for this, and I also shot front view. So we can take a look at both of these reference and pose our character accordingly. But obviously it's really important to have a very clear reference that you can bring into Blender to make sure you're following the body mechanics correctly. And you can see very clearly in the reference to the moments where there are holds, and then you can also pick apart like the key breakdowns in the animation that will help describe the action itself. So what I'm going to do is just basically start kind of blocking this in or animating this, taking a look at starting with the side view here. I'm going to kind of go frame by frame and pick out the main motions. But you can see by like frame by framing your reference, you can pick apart some of the key like breakdowns for the motion. So this right here is kind of like a big held moment. I'm still moving through a lot of this. However, if you look at my hips, you can see once I hit this position, the hips aren't really moving screen left anymore. They're holding that position, but my upper body is still moving. But there is still a tiny bit of movement in there. And you can even look by the side of my pant there that there's always like a little bit of movement. So it'll be pretty difficult to ever have like a completely held moment in your animation because there will still be some movement in there. But let's just go ahead and start blocking this. One thing that I want to make sure that I do is I'm going to press I on my keyboard. Under keying set, I actually want to change this from location and rotation. I'm just going to do whole character. So that way it will key everything on this character. So I'm going to just press I to make sure it locks the keyframe down. And then I'm going to just start blocking this and just figuring out the main poses for this. And then we'll add the breakdown. So if I scrub through here, I would consider this part right here kind of a main pose. So I'm going to press I on my keyboard at frame 12, and I'm going to start shifting my character back, again following the reference as close as I can. One thing you can do too, especially if you have a reference like this that works well, you could even do something like this and overlay your rig on top of it, or go over to your panel here of the actual image plane and change it to front, and you can adjust the opacity. But you could literally go in here and oops, I had a keyframe on that, but you could go in here and actually just animate this by following the reference itself and kind of pose your character based off of where this is actually moving. But I will undo that a couple times because I'm just going to keep it on the side here. Like this. All right. So my character's moving down. Also, I'll probably start rotating the chest back. Rotating it around that way. If you look at this motion, this right arm is starting to come up here. So I'm going to bring the shoulder up slightly. Bring this arm forward, rotate the elbow. Left arm is also coming up, so I'm going to raise it up and out, kind of. And probably actually want to get this even over more. Something more like this. And probably bring the hip down. Then you can see from frame 0 to frame 12, my foot is moved back. So I want to make sure I grab this foot control. And I'm going to position it because I'm taking a step back there. And then I'm going to rotate this to kind of open my knee up. Take the chest control. Start kind of rotating it to the side. And then what I'm going to do is jump to my front view and kind of make sure this is working well. So here I want to shift the character over this right leg more. Actually, I might want to dial back the amounts of rotation that I'm actually getting on the chest. Same for the upper chest here. But here you can see kind of what the arms are doing from this front view. Looks like this arm comes forward a bit. And out. So I've got a very basic kind of transition here. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I lock a keyframe again on frame 12 just to make sure I have keyframes on every single control, especially when you're blocking like this. It's important to make sure that you're keyframing all of your controls because if you forget to, and let's say you don't set a key like on the torso control in here and you try to start like copying and pasting parts of your animation, depending on the keyframes that you have set, it will get a little messed up in there if you don't actually have keyframes set on everything. But I'm going to just scrub forward and go to probably frame 20. Press I to lock a keyframe down, and then again, kind of following my reference closely. Hips are dropped even more. Bring the body back, start really rotating the torso a bit more. Something like this. That, start rotating the chest. Probably start rotating the chest back as well. This arm is starting to swing out. Straighten the elbow. Probably bring the chest, or excuse me, the torso down a little bit. And off to the side more. On this, there's a bit of foot roll. You can see in the reference, my foot is kind of starting to pick up. This arm is really starting to swing in front of me. Again, the chest is rotated more. This hip is probably starting to rotate a bit as well. And you can see already it's starting to take shape again, just basing a lot of this on what I'm seeing in my reference to help figure out the poses that I actually need to get in there. I'm going to start rotating this hand down as well. From the front view, I might rotate my chest like this. Kind of fix the neck so it's kind of looking, maintaining the look forward. Probably bring the neck down a little bit and rotate the head up. All right. So really I've only got the main pose at the beginning and 2 keyframes so far. Now I'm going to press A to select everything. And I'm going to go to frame 30, press I to lock a keyframe down on everything. This is when I'm getting quite a bit of rotation to the side. Chest is starting to really bend backward now. This arm is going to be coming really far forward. Shoulder's going to be coming up. This head again is still going to be trying to look where I'm going again, basing it just off the reference here. I feel like the hips should still be over on X direction a bit more over that supporting leg. One thing that I do want to do that I didn't do from the front view is you can see I have this foot shift moving backward, but I want it on that actual step over here. I want to put the foot more directly under her rather than off to the side. So you can see in my reference, I'm actually bringing the foot backward in that step. So I'm going to just copy the keyframe on frame 12 for that foot placement and copy it over here. And on frame 20, I'm probably going to bring this arm back even further, a little bit faster. And then here, this elbow start to rotate. All right, get it back like this. This sword should be kind of rotated even further back. I'm going to bring this kind of more like this. I'll check the front view as well. You can see my arm is already really far back. Grab the hips. The hips should probably be rotated in Z a bit more. And then rotated like this even more. And then here I'm missing the tilt that's in my reference, like I'm leaning really far over. I'm going to bring my hip down so you can see in my reference, frame 20 to frame 30, there's like a drop. So I want to make sure I get that. From the actual side view, I may want to rotate the top of the chest in. just a bit. Bring this arm in, bring the wrist kind of in. Again, following the reference a bit closer. Take a look at side view here. All right, so I've got my basic poses in there. I'm going to go on to the next pose for this, which would be this like up pose right here. 38, so I'm going to press I to lock a keyframe down on everything again. And then I'm just going to start posing this. So I'm going to bring the hip up. And this I would consider like a pretty important kind of breakdown. And actually something I didn't build into frame 30 is this the front foot here on the left side, or my left foot, it steps forward. It starts to step forward on frame 30, so I'm going to bring it forward. Make sure I copy that position on frame 38. And then I'm kind of like pivoting off of this foot a bit. All right, so my body's coming up a lot higher here. This elbow is actually rotated even more. And then my arm is really pivoted. Oops. Far back here. I can take a look at the side view. And then also, even from frame 30 to 38, you can see how much more rotation I'm getting in my chest. So I'm really going to start pivoting my chest around. And then also my back is starting to really extend. This part is actually pushed forward a bit, but you can see I have this big kind of like dip in my spine, so my hips might be pushed forward, but my chest is kind of rotated back. And then this arm is starting to come up, bring the shoulder up with it. The sword is dipped back here. So maybe on 30, I'll start to actually rotate this down earlier. This I might bring the arm forward, but keep it kind of rotated down, drag that hand. And this is really the important part about having good reference like this, is you can pick apart clearly what's happening. This is something that like would be pretty impossible to just animate without any reference. At least impossible to really make it look believable to it, because since there's so many different mechanics happening at once. I can exaggerate this bend in the spine even more. And on this pose, I might actually grab the foot and continue pushing it forward just slightly here. On this back foot, I'm going to start getting a bit of rotation on the heel like this. It's going to start lifting up. All right. So now I can play this, start to see basic action I'm getting. Again, really kind of just going frame by frame, making sure I have really good reference to look at, and building all of those breakdowns in there. And you'll see once I add this next, so what we could do here is, this is like a really, really important pose right here. Let me select everything on this rig. Again, pressing A on all of my controls, pressing I to lock a keyframe down on everything. But this pose right here is really important because you feel the drag of the hand and the sort of lead and follow of the body as everything comes forward. Now, one important thing to keep in mind is that this is a really important kind of key pose, but what happens in between here too, like around frame 42, is where you get that strong moment coming out of this hold that we have up at the top of the arc. So as I'm moving forward, you can see my body is kind of slowly moving forward. My arm is still really dragging behind my body, even though my body is starting to move forward. And then here from like frame 42 to 46, I like really speed up. So what we're going to do is first build the pose here and then probably go back and kind of refine the pose in between that. So I'm going to go to this pose here, frame 46. I already locked a keyframe down, so I'm just going to start posing this. So my hips are really coming forward here. I'm going to zero out the foot roll there because my foot is actually planted on the ground. This foot is actually coming off the ground now. And one thing to notice is that my front view reference is obviously timed a little bit differently than my side view. I don't have two cameras to shoot simultaneously, so I basically acted out the front view and acted out the side view, and it's kind of impossible to get those frames to match up exactly. But it's still will be a good point to look at the front view for posing and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm going to jump forward. You can see like now my body is basically completely side view to the camera, just over a couple frames. So I'm going to start really rotating this like this. Again, my body is like basically on the side, completely looking kind of off to the side here. My upper chest is still dragging behind. Again, this foot is picking up. So I'm going to probably pick it up and start to push it out, because you'll notice in my front view, my right foot here comes up and starts to move out off to the side. So I kind of want to do something similar. I'm probably going to move it backward a little bit, start getting a bit more tilt, a bit more height to it as well. And then really also start rotating it inward a bit more. Hips should probably be rotated. From the front view, I'm going to shift my hips over this supporting leg, because now that leg is taking all of the weight. So I want to make sure that I shift my body over that way. Now for this arm, it's coming forward here. This wrist is really dragging behind. I look at it from the front view. This arm is kind of straightening out, and I'm probably going to drop the shoulder. Take a look at it from the side view. So here, I'm bringing my arm really quickly back that direction. I'm going to need to rotate that shoulder quite a bit. And then I'm going to actually drag this elbow. So you can see, again, in my reference, this is where we get some really nice spacing and quickness, is like how much my body changes over these couple frames. Again, my body is now like completely side view to the camera. I'll probably bring my chest forward, but bring my torso forward, drag my chest behind. I want to get even more drag in this arm swinging forward, so I'll probably bend it a bit like that, but keep the sword kind of up. For the head, I still want to focus forward. You can see even in my side view, I'm still kind of looking forward, kind of looking where I'm actually attacking, which is important. All right, so this pose is working pretty well, but I kind of want to see how it feels with the next pose. Because it kind of stops there. So what I'm going to do is press A to select everything, go to, honestly, what I'm going to do is basically, I'm going to go to this pose right here, frame 53. I'm going to press I, and I'm going to start getting that pose in there. So hips are going to be dropped down really far. This foot is now kind of fully over and planted on the ground. So I want to make sure I get that in there and kind of rotated. Now I want to look at my side view or my front view for this, even though it's timed wrong. I know I want to pose similar to that in my front view. So like for this, I'll probably hips back, this chest, and I'll probably actually pose it here. Really rotating this chest down. Like that. Let's see. Actually, what I'm going to do is press A. I'm going to lock a keyframe on frame 63, and I'm going to kind of build this pose from the front view as well, and then paste it back onto the keyframe on frame 53. Because again, the front view is timed a little bit differently than the side view. This arm is going to be really far back. This foot needs to be pushed even more, rotated. I'll probably rotate this a bit like that. Probably push the hip over this way a bit more. And then this, again, this is the hand that's really swinging through, so I want to kind of exaggerate this, so I'm going to have to bring this arm. And I know these shoulders are not the best, so it's hard to get great shapes with them. But basically this arm is kind of completely whipping through here now. Really rotate my chest a bit more. And then the head, again, that's an important thing, keeping that eye direction. Basically just following the reference, making sure even through the end of the swing, she's still kind of maintaining her gaze forward a bit. And actually on this pose that I'm doing here, frame 46, I want to drag the head. Looking at my reference, you can see my head is dragging behind, so I kind of want to get that moment in here. So like right here, that head will kind of drag behind. You can probably even push this rotation even more. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I was kind of looking at frame 63 because that's where my slash kind of pose is, my final kind of pose for the actual hit. I'm going to take this and copy it to frame 53 because that's kind of the timing that I have on this position right here. So what I'm going to do is copy this on frame 63, paste it onto frame 53. So you can see these are the exact same poses. So that should work. Great. All right, so that's working pretty well. Timing-wise, obviously, timing-wise, it should work decently because we're basing this on real-world timing here. Just looking at my reference and basing my key poses off my reference position there. But what I would need to do now is this is where a breakdown really comes into play to describe the action. So if we look at my reference here, that I have my arm dragging behind, which my pose matches that pretty well. But we're losing the slash because what's happening is that we don't have a pose in there to help describe this action. So Blender is basically blending between the pose on frame 46, the pose on frame 53. So what you're getting is you're missing that actual slash. You can see in my reference, my arm extends out and kind of points the sword out to actually slash down. But in my reference, because it's blending from this pose to this pose, you can see the arm kind of just moves down. So what we need to do now is actually add that breakdown in there for this action. So I'm going to press A to lock a keyframe down on everything. I'm going to go to frame 48, just 2 frames in front, and then I'm going to get that extension in here. So this is where I kind of need to tell Blender what I actually want to do here. Like what should the arm actually be doing through this motion. I can look from my front view as well, kind of look at the trajectory of the sword itself and sort of the path it would be taking. And again, from my side view, if this were something actually in front of her, she would be pointing her sword down like I'm doing in my reference to actually kind of slash and getting that kind of full extension. On my shoulder, I'm going to bring it in. Oops, and probably rotate it up a bit. From the front view, I want to follow that path of the sword. That looks like it's working pretty well. All right, so you can see by adding that breakdown in there, basically going in here and seeing that we've got the main pose of my reference in there, but since we didn't have a breakdown between frame 46 and 53, Blender just blended between that. So we were missing the actual slash, and we needed to kind of define this pose a bit better. For this, what I might actually do is, as my body is whipping down here as well, I want to start rotating the chest because she's kind of whipping the whole sword arm around, so her chest is going to be suddenly kind of whipping over like that. So you want to make sure you get in there. And I'll probably add a bit more rotation and bend like that. All right, so we've got the main pieces of our animation. Probably actually going to take the hip control, start rotating it down slightly here. And then what I want to actually do Let's see. Press A. I'm going to take the pose on frame 53, copy it on frame 63. Make sure we're working with the same pose there. But here, what I want to capture now, this last section, 53 to 63, you can see I actually bring my hip up. So what I'm going to do is bring my hip up a little bit more. So it goes frame 53. Actually start to stand there, which I actually don't want. I kind of want what I do in my front view reference, whereas I slice, I start to raise up, but I still kind of just settle back down. So for this animation, I'm not going to return back to the idle position. What I actually want to do is basically just hold this pose. And now you can see my frames. I think I need to add more frames in here. Yeah, so this actual reference continues on for a little bit, so I actually stand back to the idle position. I'm not going to really worry about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically just hold this pose down here. So for like the rise up, I'm going to start to get this rise up that I have. So I go down. I'm going to actually rotate my chest down because you can see my reference, my hips are kind of, my chest is rotating down, but my hips are rotating up. And let me press A and lock a keyframe down on frame 61 for everything. But you can see what I'm going to do is continue this rotation that I'm getting. So I hit the main pose that I want on frame 53. Now I'm going to continue rotating the chest that direction. And actually rotate the arm through this. And here my foot is raising up. You can see in my reference. I might actually continue this arm going back. But that works. All right. So like here, my hips are coming up. This I want to continue rotating along the Z just a little bit, my torso. So this is kind of, I would consider a held pose, but I'm kind of just living within this pose and pushing it further. So this is like my kind of final stab pose or whatever, where I kind of slice all the way through. And then this is still kind of living within that pose, but I'm making sure that if the hips are dropping down, like in my reference, they kind of bounce back up. But my body is kind of continuing the overall motion that you're getting. So you're getting like a really nice kind of bounce at the end, which works well. But so what I'm going to do now is kind of look at my front view reference. So you can see I have that bounce up and then the kind of settle back down. So what I'm going to do is press A. So I go up on frame 61. And now what I'm going to do is basically just copy. So frame 53 and frame 63 are very similar poses. The arm is just slightly different. I'm going to shift the pose on frame 63 forward. So you're getting like a bounce settle. So it goes up, down, and then we can kind of just settle and live within this pose. And I'm going to take a look at my front view. So if I go up, down, and then I might even go down again very slowly. I don't want it to look like she's about to stand up again. I'm going to press A, set a keyframe on everything. So she goes down, she goes up, down. Let's see, boom, boom. And then here, I'll probably go up again, but just very subtly. Bam, down. And then this is where she, again, this is just really just holding within this one pose, but I'm just kind of adding like a bit of twist to it. And I feel like the down is too fast. So what I'm going to do is press A to select all of my keyframes. I'm going to shift these two keyframes over so that goes up, and then the drop down is a little bit slower. And then this final kind of settle. Again, this is just holding this pose basically, but I'm kind of still maintaining a bit of movement in there. So yeah, this is very quickly kind of just blocking in an animation. Now what I want to show real quickly is further refining this. So if you remember, we went from frame 0 to frame 12 for this, but there's lots of stuff happening in between there. So I'm going to go forward to frame 7. If we look at my side view, I'm going to press A to select everything, press I to lock a keyframe down. This is important because what's actually happening here is my hips are actually moving up slightly at this very first step. So I kind of want to get that in there. So the hips are going to come up and then down. My foot also needs to actually show that it's coming off the ground. So I'm going to raise it up. So this is where you start adding in even more breakdowns. Once you, like all the poses that we have in there describe this animation pretty well, but now we need to go through and kind of pick apart like what's actually happening between some of these main poses. So again, like frame 0 to 7, my hips are actually coming up slightly. They might start to rotate this way. So now we actually adding that one breakdown in there between the keyframe on frame 0 and the keyframe on frame 12 helps describe that a lot better. Now we're actually getting like a step back. So this foot is actually lifting up. Then it drops down. And then this is another breakdown I want to get in there. So going from here to here, this really forward pose, I kind of want to ease out of this. So if I scrub forward a few frames, I'm going to go to frame, I think 41 should be good. Actually, maybe 42. Let me press I and set a keyframe on everything. So this is what I want to capture here. So you can see my chest is actually going kind of the path that it's taking on my reference. It's coming forward, it's bending a little bit. I might actually play around with this bend that it's getting on frame 42. But what I want to do is fix the arm, because you can see in my reference, this arm is still dragging really far behind my body, so it's giving me a really strong snap to the actual hit. So I want to rotate my wrist down on this pose. And this is, again, a breakdown that will refine the action. I'm going to rotate the arm back. So it's coming forward. The arm is coming forward still, but I'm kind of dragging it even more. So you get like this moment in the air when my hips are coming up where I'm like kind of holding this pose with the sword behind my back and then quickly snapping it forward here. So I think that works a lot better. Yeah, so doing that allows us to get more snap in that movement. The head I want to fix. Again, looking at my reference, my head is actually more like this, a bit more to the side. Even here, I want to get it more to the side. Probably really continue that drag, just getting more drag in the head. And then it will snap kind of forward. One thing that I can do on this is maybe get a bit more of like a head detail shake. So maybe here it'll be, let me actually see if it works. So when the body comes up, I'm gonna actually rotate the head forward to kind of try to, again, keep it locked forward. To kind of keep like an intensity to the head. Maybe it starts to bend this way a little bit and then back. See how that looks. I think what I feel on this down is too much. So I want to go bring the hip up slightly. You see. Actually, you know, I think it's actually this arm that I don't like. I don't like how much it swings down. Probably want to hold it a bit more where it was. Something like that works again. Just holding that pose, but kind of adding a bit of bounce, a bit of sway in there. And again, my reference actually goes back up to the standing position, but I kind of want to just hold this slash pose for the end of the animation. But yeah, you can see how we're able to really quickly get a really strong first pass of this. We've got all the main poses in there to describe this entire action. There's stuff I still want to fix, like this rotation back. I might actually do something like this. So the chest drops down, the hips are moving back, then the chest moves back up. Maybe not that high. Something like that. I think something like that works better. So again, we're basically just holding in this one pose, but we're just adding a tiny bit of like up and down in the hips, a little bit of continual kind of chest rotation to sell this kind of big slash that she does into the settle. I might even, like frame 53, I might bring that chest down even more. And we can kind of push that as much as we need to. But yeah, this is a really great way to block your animations. Again, getting reference that works really well, is super clear, that you can follow along exactly and pick apart the main poses that you need. You can see, like, once you get those main kind of poses in there, like I have here, Blender does give you quite a bit for free. Like, I feel like the transition from frame 20 to 30 actually works pretty well. One thing would be going in here and adding, like, you can see there's like a lot more detail in my feet that's happening. There's more like rotation here. It's picking up a tiny bit there. So you could add on those tiny little details in between these main poses. But this gives us basically everything we need. It's clean. The timing works well. We based it exactly on the timing of our reference. If we ever want to speed things up, we can always freely do that by shifting our keyframes around. But again, this gives us that really strong base to work with. So yeah, hopefully you can see sort of the process of building in not only your breakdowns like we did for some of these, like again, from frame 0 to frame 12, we just looked at our reference and kind of we built the main big pose change from 0 to 12, and then we went back in there and added that actual rise up of the hips, the rise of the foot. And then again here, not only is this like an important breakdown, but it is showing a lot of kind of drag, follow through, and well, actually not follow through, but lead and follow. So the chest is leading this action, but we still have this elbow really dragging behind. So you're getting that nice whipping motion in this. Again, just looking at our reference to see exactly what our body is doing. And then here, not only do we have a nice hold, again, we're basically just living in this one single pose for all of this settle. So we built this hold in here, but then beyond that, we have some really nice follow through where the arm is swinging down, and then that weight of the chest is still carrying that, or excuse me, the weight of the arm is still carrying a bit of that chest rotation. So the chest is still continuing to rotate, then the hips kind of come up. So we're getting a really nice sense of like lead and follow, and then follow through on the rest of the body into this final settle. So yeah, hopefully you're able to get something out of this, kind of seeing how I go about animating a shot like this. Again, bringing in your reference like this, basically just kind of going through your reference, picking apart the main elements of your reference, and kind of just matching your animation as closely to the reference as you possibly can. And then once you've done that, we can always go back and like really start to push some of our poses in our animation. Like here, maybe we wanted to be like really bring her back and kind of play around with some of this, but we always have that ability now that we have this really strong base. So yeah, hopefully you're able to get something out of this.